our sponsors for the Daf Yomi. Of a Talmud Torah sponsorship by Shmuel Leba Dinovitz for zechus, aliyas, neshama for HaRav Peretz Avraham, Harav Benyamin Moshe Zol. And that's for today. Wonderful. Today's Daf is Kesuvos 15, Kesuvos 2. We are starting at the Mishnah at the back of the hand, the bottom of the hand, the bottom of Yud, Dalid, Amud Beis. We had a very exciting sugya yesterday, and I think I mentioned Yavamas 5 times yesterday, so we'll just try to mention it once today. So the Mishnah says, Amar Rabbi Yosi, Maise betinoket sheyarda lemalot mayim min ha'ayin. There was a story, a true event, unfortunately, with a young girl who went down to fill up her water from the ayin. Now, ayin means an eye, but it means the water source, like a mayan is a similar word. She goes down to the well to get the water. Oy venensa. She was violated. She was taken advantage of. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And the question came to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and he said, Im rov anshe ir mesin lekahuna. If most of the people of that city are kosher lekahuna. Now, remember yesterday we said they don't have mamzerut in the family, or natinim, givonim, or avdei malachim, or chalolim. Then harei zutinas lekahuna. Then this girl who was nebuch abused could still be married to a Kohen. She still has all her options open. Now, just a reminder, this is a b'diavad situation. If we find them in the act, we find somebody attacking a woman, then, as we said in Yavamas, so there we am, I'm Yotzei referencing Yavamas, as we said, that Jewish law compares the violation of a woman to a murder, and therefore they're allowed to use force to stop that act. Even if they have to kill the man, that is allowed. Now, if they don't find them in the act, but they find him later, then what the Torah prescribes in Kitetse is that the woman has the option to force him to marry her. Now, I'm not sure she would want to after meeting that way. It's not really a great way to make a shidduch, but she can lock him down and force him to marry her if she wants to. It's her option. And if not, he has to pay the mohar habetulot. And remember, that was our source about a week ago for the Kesuva being deraisa. It was this mohar betulot, the settlement made to virgin brides. That's what the fine he has to pay. Now, in addition to that, of course, what's not spoken out and sometimes gets forgotten in the mix is if this man has caused any physical damage to the woman, he has to pay for that. He has to pay for nezek, ripui, boshes, for her embarrassment, for any medical bills. So what's sometimes lost in the mix, because we're just dealing with halacha yavesha, we're just dealing with, can she marry a Kohen or not, is that if she was really attacked by a man, he owes her money, he owes her the nezek and the shame and the medical bills and all of that. And not only that, but the rabbis are probably going to whip this guy with a palm branch that has thorns, like we saw last Shabbos, the guy who was, saying he found Petach Patuach. Remember, this was Daf Gimel. It's a long time ago, I know. He was claiming Petach Patuach, so the rabbi said, yeah, okay, we'll believe you, but we're going to whip you, because obviously you've been around the zona, so we're going to whip you with a thorny palm branch. They'd probably do that to a guy here, too, in this case, who didn't want to marry this girl he took advantage of. And so anyway, sometimes we ignore some components of halacha and we just focus on what the Mishnah says, but there is a lot more going on in halacha. Just a reminder. Good. Gemara. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri the Amar Kaman. So who's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri positing like here? Ik Rabban Gamliel. Remember, we had this machlokas Rabban Gamliel yesterday. Afilu barov pesuli nami machsher. Even if most of the guys in the town were not fit to be a Kohen. Remember, Rabban Gamliel said, we believe a woman, we trust the woman to say who she's pregnant from or who she was alone with, so she could still be kosher lekahuna. We believe her. So if it's like Rabbi Yochanan, he should believe her even if majority is psulim, as Rabbi Gamliel believes her generally. Ik Rabbi Yoshua, afilu rov kasherim nami posul. If it's like Rabbi Yoshua, who doesn't believe women to say who they're pregnant from or who they're with, he shouldn't believe her, even if it's rov kasherim. So what are we talking about? We need a rov here. We saw yesterday it was really like a bari v'shema issue, or it was a suffix versus a sveka issue between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. But here we're talking about a rov issue. So what's different here? Achi Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, turning over the top of Daf 15, B'kronos shel tzipori hayamaisa. It was in the wagons of Tzipori was the act. So Tzipori is the city. We can assume that's where the well was. But there were wagons there too. So Rashi says it was Biyom Hashuk. It was market day. That that there are groups and there are caravans, there's wagons, that they're coming for market day. So you understand the farmers and the villagers from near Tzipori would pull up with their wagon to sell their watermelons or their onions or whatever it was at Tzipori. So now we don't just have a rove of the population of Tzipori, which were probably kosher Yidden, but we also have these guys from the outside. So what's their status? Okay, the Rebbe Ami, Dama Rebbe Ami, Vehu Shehaita Sia Shal B'nei Adam Ksherim Overet L'Sham. So he says there's not only a rove of Ksherim in Tzipori, where this Maisa took place with the young girl, but there was also this group of kosher men passing by. You know, it was a market day, and there was a whole wagon caravan from the next door village, and those guys were also kosher. So it wasn't just one rove, it was two rove was the case. And we're going to see why in a few minutes. Gemara will explain why we need two rove, not just one. Remember, deraisa, we go after the rove. So halacha harov, when there's a court case, we vote with the majority of the judges. Achar rabim l'chatos, things are batul barov deraisa. On rabbinical levels, sometimes you need 100 or 101, like we saw in Truma recently in the Mishnah Yomi. Always a good day to start the Mishnah Yomi, Rabbi Osai. But that's only D'Rabbanan. Deraisa, things are usually batul barov, and we can rely on the rov. So why do we need two here? We're going to see. Kid Rabbi Yanai, Delma Rabbi Yanai, Niv Elis Bikronos, if some woman had relations in the wagons, Kashera lekahuna. She'd be kosher lekahuna because these guys in the wagons from the village, they're kosher lekahuna. They're good guys. I mean, okay, they're good guys, but okay, fine. Bikronos lekadaytach. What you mean? They're actually having relationships in the wagons? That's a little weird. Okay, it's not like a circus wagon here. Ela nivelis b'shas kronos kasher lekahuna. No, what we're saying is when the wagons show up, we will make her kosher lekahuna. Why? Because there's not just the one rove in her own city of kosher guys, but there's a second rove. The men who are coming along with the wagons, they're also kosher lekahuna. They're not mams, they're not tanchalo. They're good to go. Aval perish echad mitzipuri ubal avlad shtuki. But in comparison, if one guy came out of Tzipori, and we know for sure, Rashi says, this guy's from Tzipori, and he lived with the girl, or he was, with the girl by the well, or whatever it was, then she is not kashera, and the vlad is shtuki. Like we spoke out yesterday, shtuki means shtok. It means we don't know who the father is with certainty, and we'd say he has no yichus. Even if we know the father was a Kohen, we say he still doesn't get all the privileges and rights of a Kohen. Remember yesterday was Machlokas Ritva and Rashi. If you even eat Truma, we know the father's a Kohen, but we don't have Zara Miyuchas Acharav. It's a shtuki, so we're not sure, because there's only one rove. Even though rove of Tzipori is kasher, most of them are kosher, but if one guy comes out of the rove, we're going to see that's a potential problem. We need two roves. We need two potential groups that this man could come from, akin to the Sveika we spoke out yesterday, but Almanas Isa. There's more than one possibility here that would make her kosher. Kiha dechiyata Rav Dimi Amar Zeiri Amar Rabbi Chanina Amrei Lo Amar Zeiri Amar Rabbi Chanina. So some Rabbi Chanina is involved here. It's saying Holchin Achar Rov Ha'ir. We go after the majority of the city, Vein Holchin Achar Rov Sia, but not after the majority of the groups, the travelers. Klapi Laya, the Gemara says no, that's not right at all. You need to say the opposite. Hane Naidi. These travelers are Naidi. They're movement. They're in motion. We say Mayim is Naidi also. Water is not at rest. Hani Kvi, the people in the city are Kavua, Vikaime, and they're standing in their place. And we're going to see, the Gemara is going to say in a few lines, Kavua Kamechsa Mechsa Dami, that something that's Kavua, that's in place, has sort of a greater significance in halacha, as we're going to explain on this daf. So Ella, what do you mean to say? Holchin achar rov ha'ir. We do go after the majority of the city, which is kosher to marry kohanim. Vehu, but only when, Rabbi Osai, de'ika rov siya bechada. There's also a majority of the travelers. These guys showing up for market day, from the villages, from the farms that are outside Tzipori. These guys are also kosher. We have two kasherim options. So the man she was with, okay, if he was from Tzipori, he was probably from the rove that's kosher. But he also could have been from the traveling guys coming in for market day. And most of them are kosher, so we're going to allow it in that case. Ve'ein holchin achar rov ha'ir. Greita. We don't go after the rove of the city by itself, so it's not market day. And the only guys around are the guys in Tzipori. Even though rove of them are kosher l'kahuna, we wouldn't merely go after one rove. Velo achar rov siya greita. And if it's, out in the market day, but they're just in the market, and it's only those guys in the wagons, it's a one rove, not the guys from Tzipori, it wouldn't go after that either. My timer, why not? We go after the rov deraisa rabosai. My timer gezerah. It's a gezerah derabanan. Rov sia atu rov ha'ir. We have a gezerah of the rov of the travelers, the movers, onto rov of the ear, because rov of the ear is a problem. Rov ha'ir nami idika ozle inhu. If they're going ligabot to her, if someone comes to the city and goes to her, she's out at the well or she's somewhere else, wherever she is, kol de parish meruba parish. Whoever comes out of a group and he's now in movement, we assume he's separated from the rov. In the fourth parak of Brachas, we even learned this out, that a guy said he came from Asher, he came from like Moab or something. We said, is he kosher to marry a Jew? Is he really a Moavi? Well, kol de parish meruba parish. He should be a Moavi. He says he comes from Moab, versus if you went to Moab and tried to marry somebody, maybe it's half and half, something like this we're going to see. Lo tzricha, so we don't need this to cut, we don't need the gezerah, only onto the case of the ka'azla ihi, when she went, liga by who? Went to him. So it matters if they're going to his place or if they're going to her place. It actually makes a difference in halacha. If she goes to him, to some guy in Tzipori, to Havale Kavua. He's Kavua in his place in Tzipori. Amar Rabbi Zera. This is an underlined line, Rabbosai. If you need a pencil, I have one up here. Kol Kavua kamechsa o mechsa dame. Anything that's in his place is considered half and half. And the Gemara is going to bring some cases to illustrate this today, so don't worry if we don't understand yet. We will understand by the end of the day. Mi be'inan trei rubi. Do we really need two sets of rov? The rov of the guys in Sipuri and the rov of the guys there from Market Day. Tanya, but the Brisa says not like that. It says Teisha chanuyot. This is a famous case. We've seen this in Chulin. We've seen this in other places when it's talking about a rov versus something kavua, something set in its place, which again has a certain chashivas in halacha. There are 9 stores. These are 9 kosher stores. Kulan mochot basar shchuta. They're all selling shachut meat. Of course the meat is geshechted. It's not alive. We mean it's kosher meat. It's good to go. So you have 9 kosher butchers in one town. V'achat mocheres basar nevela. And there's one not kosher butcher in the town. So, you understand, you have your 7 Mile, you have your Wasserman, you have your everybody. You have 9 kosher meat stores and 1 not kosher. And what happens? Ve'lokach me'echat mehen, and he went and he bought meat from one of the stores. Ve'ena yedaya me'eze mehen lokach. So he knows he went into a store and bought meat. And back then they didn't have bags that said 7 Mile. They didn't have bags that said Seasons. They just wrapped everything in a piece of newspaper or a piece of paper or whatever it was. Or you threw the meat over your back, over your shoulder. You threw it in your bag. You didn't have, things wrapped up with a star K, with a hechsher, with a seal. So you have a piece of meat. You know you bought it at a store, and you'd think that might be okay because 9 out of 10 of the stores are kosher. Only 1 out of 10 is treif. You might think that's okay. Sveiku aser. The suffix is aser. Again, we're going to say this is kavua, kamechsa, mechsa. Even though 9 out of 10 stores are both, 9 out of 10 stores are kosher, but because you went to them, you went to the place where the store is kavua. This is not one of those little car wagons that shows up and starts cooking in the parking lot. This is a kavua store. It's in its place, and you went there, so it's considered mechetzel, half and half. So there's a 50-50 chance that, halachically speaking, the person got the meat from the treif store. So he's got a problem. He can't eat the meat anymore. This is, of course, again, he has no simon. There's no hechsher or wrapping or bag that says 7 Mile Market on it. It's just a piece of meat. He doesn't know any better. Benimtza, but if you found meat, Rashi says you found it outside in the shuk. You didn't find it in the store. You just found it on the park bench. You found it at the bus stop. Yeah, halach achar harov. You could go after the majority. So this is kind of an amazing thing. You went to a store and bought a piece of meat. 9 out of 10 stores are kosher. And yet, because kavua, kemechsa, mechsa, you can't eat the meat. It's considered not kosher, also the suffix, because of a doubt. But if you just found a piece of meat just sitting there, because 9 out of 10 stores are kosher, most of the meat in the city is kosher meat, you could take that home and you could eat it. It's sort of a pelagic thing, but this is the halacha of kavua, kemechsa, mechsa. The key tema, and if you're going to tell me, this is when the border is not closed, the gates of the city are not locked, so meat could come in, that there's another rove from outside. So you could say maybe this meat, this case of the stores, is also two roves, like our case of Tzipori with the wagons coming. You could say this is 9 out of 10 butchers in the city are kosher, and not only that, but they're also importing meat from Lakewood and from New Jersey and from Deal and from New York City. That's also coming in, so even the rove of the outside is also kosher. So I said we have two roves in this case. Even though the border is closed, Lamaisa, and there's no meat coming in from Lakewood, you would still rely on the rove that a piece of meat you found on the bus stop would be kosher in a city with 9 out of 10 butchers, with most of the meat kosher. So how come you need two roves by this girl? You would need the rove of the men in Tzipori and the rove of the visiting men for market day. So mala asa b'yichsin. It's a higher stringency we made by yichus. The Kohanim Lamaisa are very suspicious about marrying a girl who might have had relations with a halal or a mamzer or nothing. And who can blame them? They're Kohanim. They need to retain their yichus. It's something we spoke out yesterday. It said, Zaram yichus acharav. The Kohanim are very machmer. If they don't know the father, we don't give them the privileges of a Kohen. So Lamaisa, they've done some genetic testing on Kohanim. And they've found in their genetic testing that pretty much all of them, Baruch Hashem for Kohanim, I love Kohanim, pretty much all of the Kohanim have a Y chromosome that they get, because of course the Y chromosome comes from the father. That's just normal human biology, is that they have the same Y chromosome from one man about 4,000 years ago. So who was around 4,000 years ago? Well, that's Aaron Cohen. So the genetic testing shows the Kohanim are actually pretty good with their yichus. So Baruch Hashem for Kohanim, they're stringent, they need two roves. Again, it's a gezerah, because if we say, oh, you could rely on one rove, then we might come to rely on that rove and mater her kahuna, even though she went to the man. She went to his place, and it's kavua kamechsel mechsa. And since she went to his place, even though the majority of tzipori is kosher, but some of them are chalolim, some of them are not kosher, so it's kavua kamechsel mechsa, and she would lamaisa in halacha be pasal lekahuna. So we don't rely on one rove, but two roves that most of the guys in tzipori, plus most of the guys in the visiting wagons, we would rely on for Yuchsin, and Mazel Tov, she can marry a Kohen. Good. Gufa Amar Bizeira, Kol Kavua Kamechsa Mechsa Dami. Anything in its place, it's like half and half. It's not after the majority. Bein Lakula, Bein Lachumra. This is whether we're being Mekel or Machmer. So this is not merely a Dirabanan stringency, this is a Deraisa concept. Minale, how does he know the Rabbi Zeira? How does Rabbi Zeira know this? If you say from the case of the 9 stores, Kulan Mocher Basar Shchuta. All 9 stores are selling kosher meat. The Achad Basar Nevela, and the 10th store is selling Nevela, not kosher. The Lokach Mechad Mehen, he went into a store. The Eini Yadeim Eizim and Lokach, he doesn't know which store he went into. Sveika Aser, so he can't eat that meat. It's Aser Mishim Safek. The Nimtza, but he finds it on the bus stop. Halach HaRav, he can go after the majority. Chasam L'chumra, that's a chumra. So that's not a proof that we apply Mechsa al Mechsa, that Kavua in its place is like half and half. That's not a proof we apply L'kula. The 9 frogs. If anyone asks you where the 9 frogs are in Shas, it's right here in Kesuvos. So Kesuvos, all about marriage and 9 frogs. Good. So there's 9 frogs, v'sheretz echat b'neihem, and 1 sheretz. Now the Rashi says the sheretz is a tzav, which shehu domed litzvardeya. Now you should know in modern Hebrew, tzav usually means a turtle. We should know this, University of Maryland. Okay, so tzav usually means turtle in modern Hebrew, but it sounds like in Mishnaic Hebrew, tzav meant a toad. And a frog and a toad are very similar. Some of them have warts, some don't. Okay, they're frogs, they're toads. They look pretty similar. But a tzav is listed as a sheretz, meaning the Torah lists it as one of the creepy, crawly, yucky things that when they're dead, but they're still moist, they are mitame. So guys, don't touch toads. Thanks. So what happened? There's these 9 things, and 9 of them, 10 things. 9 of them are frogs. 1 is a toad. Naga me'echabehem, he touched one of these as he was walking by, and a yedei me'ezem naga. He doesn't know whether he touched the frog or the toad. Sfeika tame. Out of Suffolk, it's tame, even though 9 out of 10 are frogs and are not mitame sheretz, but one of them's a toad, and they're sitting there in their pile of toad and frog corpses, so they're kavua. So you touched one of them, it's considered mechse al mechse. It's a 50-50 chance you hit the toad in halacha. So lemaisa, he's tamei mishum safek. Chasam nami l'chumra, that's also a chumra. So where's the kula about kavua? Ela mitisha shratzim. If you had 9 toads, tzfardeya echat, and only 1 frog, benehem, among the pile. V'naga be'echad mehen, and he touches one of these creatures in the pile. Eina yodea be'ezeh mehen naga. He doesn't know whether he touched the frog or the toad. So now it depends, actually. The halacha depends if he's tamei or not. Birshusa yachid, if he's in a private domain. He's in an enclosed area. Sfeiko tamei. A suffix is tamei. Because we don't know what happens. We consider it a 50-50 chance. But because he's in Rishusa Yachid, we bend towards Chumrah. We say he's Tameh. But Rishusa Rabim, out in public, Sfeiko Tahor. Does anyone know where we learned this chiluk from? You guys need more coffee. I think I heard Sota. Sota's good. Sota's a good answer. Sota daf koach. It's coming up soon, Rabosai. Sota's coming up. It's on the horizon. We're in the right section. Sota's coming up. We learn that a man warns his wife not to go in seclusion with another man. If she does go into seclusion, boom, she's usher as a sota until Hashem himself, until God himself can prove her innocence or punish her guilt. But she's a sota because there's a suffix of tuma. We don't know what they did behind closed doors, and it was behind closed doors. It was shusa yachid. But if she was talking in public with the same exact man, in public there's no problem. In public there's no sota situation, and there's no suffix tuma. So we apply that generally even to the case of 9 frogs and 1 sheretz, that we say yes, in Rishusa Rabim you could be mekel, even though it's kavua, it's kamechsa mechsa. It's considered halachically a 50-50 chance that he touched the toad and he's tameh. But in Rishus Rabim, in public, we're going to be tola it lakula and say he is tahor. So we see that kavua, kamechsel mechse dame, that can be a kula as well as a chumrah. Midiraisa minilon, and midiraisa, how do we know the subject of kavua, kamechsel mechse? Amar kra va'arav lo v'kam alav. And this is about murder. God forbid. The pasuk says he's arav lo. He, waits in ambush for this man, vikam alav, and then he attacks on him. So this emphasizes that his intention and his action were for the same person. Ad shi'et kaven lo. So he's not guilty of murder. He's not punished by the court of murder. Lamaisa, if he killed somebody, the guy's still dead, and we're still going to go after this guy. But to find him guilty in the Sanhedrin of capital murder, it's only if he killed the guy he was intending to kill. There's no transference of intent by murder in halacha. Rabbanan, actually there is, but not in this case. For Rabbanan, Amrei Devei Rabbi Yanai, the rabbis say from Rabbi Yanai, Prot Lazurik Even Lego. This excludes someone throwing a rock at a group. Heichi Dami, what are we talking about? Ile Madika Tisha Kinanim. If there's 9 kinanim, 9 pagans in this group, Echad Yisrael, and 1 Jew in this group, and they're walking down the street, Benayim, and so what happened is a guy threw a large rock at this group of people, and Nebuch killed one of them. Typically, Deruba kinanim. So you could say we can't find him guilty of capital murder because most of them are kinanim. Now, it's still usher. And if we recall in Sanhedrin, if somebody's going around murdering people, even if there's no witnesses, even if there's no hatra, no warning, so we can't technically execute him for murder. Remember what they would do to the guy? What? Kippah. They lock him up in the kippah, which is a dome, and they overfeed him a lot of barley until his stomach bursts, which is why people who drink a lot of barley, they get a big stomach. It's the same concept, just less fatal. But if a guy is a danger to society, the rabbis had sort of extrajudicial methods of protecting society from the bad actors, but to find him guilty of capital murder, they couldn't do because he threw a rock at a group that was majority Kananim, so he wouldn't technically be guilty of capital murder. So inami polga suffering the fakshers lahakil. So even if you say kavua kamechsa mechsa, and this group is considered half Kananim and half Jews, even though there's 1 Jew, or it's literally 5 Kananim, 5 Jews, we say suffik nefashos lahakel, that the Bezdin is commanded hitzilu ha'eda. We learn about this in Sanhedrin, that we try to look for defenses to the accused. We don't try to convict people. Jewish law does not have guilty until proven innocent. It's innocent until proven guilty. That's how halacha operates. And so the court, the Bezdin, the Sanhedrin Agadol even, is commanded to look for excuses, look for legal defenses, and even look for exculpatory evidence that's going to find him not guilty, or even technical reasons like, he didn't have hasra, we can't execute him. Now, again, they might lock him up in the kippah if he's a danger to society, but they're not going to execute him for capital murder without all of the requirements. So that's safek nefashos lahakel. We can't say half and half. We can't say he intended to commit capital murder, so the Bezdin can't execute him. A reminder, we mentioned in Maseches Makos that there was a machlokes, a Sanhedrin that executed a criminal once every 7 years was considered bloodthirsty, and another year so was no, that's once every 70 years. Because we see there were a lot of technical reasons that they could refrain from executing a person who, Lamaisa, the person did kill somebody. The person might have committed murder, but because it wasn't the official definition in the Torah of capital murder, they might go lenient on him. Again, they might lock him up, keep him away from society, but it wasn't capital murder. So lo tzricha nikatishi Yisraelim kanani echad. So the case of Kula here is when you have 9 Jews in the group with 1 Kanani, and they're walking down the street. Tehavale Kanani Kavua, but he's in the group, or they're standing at the street corner is a better example. So the Kanani is like Kavua, Ko Kavua Kamechse or Mechse Dame. So even though this guy threw a big rock at a group, and even though there's 9 Jews in the group, we'd say, oh, halach HaRav, he's intending to commit capital murder of a Jew. The Sanhedrin should execute him publicly with all of the halachot required. We say no, because the group is Kavua kamechsa mechsa. So even though there's only 1 Kanani in the group, he's as if it's half and half, and we can't execute the Jew for capital murder. So going back to our mission, so we've proven that this kavua kamechsa mechsa is a concept deraisa, bein l'chumra, bein l'kula. We proved it from the frogs and the toads. We proved it from the guy throwing the rock at the group, even if it's 9 Jews and 1 Kanani, it's mechsa, and the Bezdin has to go leniently on him. But getting back to our case of the girl who went to the well and never was violated, and we said she's kosher l'kahuna. So why was she kosher l'kahuna? In the Mishnah, it sounded like there was only one rove of the city. We didn't mention wagons. What was going on in that case? So Idmar Rabbi Ashi Amarav Halacha Rabbi Yosi. So we say the halacha is Rabbi Yosi who brought this story in the Mishnah that only one rove was good enough. One rove was adequate. Rav Chanan bar Rava Amar Rav Harash Shah Haita. He says, no, that was Harash Shah. So Rashi speaks out that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Tzorech Shah Haita. There was another reason at this time to be mater this girl to kahuna, even though there's only one rove. O Rau Sham Shartzi de Heker Devarim L'Chater. He found another reason to be mater her to kahuna in the case of the girl going to the well of Oladuris Trey Rubibinan. But like we said, there's a gezerah, you need 2 roves. We're worried about kavua, kamechsa, mechsa. So for yichus, to make the kohanim happy, we'd normally need 2 roves. It was only Rasha, it was only for that one time. Masir Rabbi Yirmiyah, le'yichsin lobinin Trey Rubi. For yichusin, we don't need 2 roves. Chatznan, but there's a Mishnah turning over to Amud Beis, Rabbi Matzah ba tinik mushlach. What happens if you find a kid thrown out on the street? Now this sounds a little strange. How many times have we seen a kid just thrown outside and left there on the street? Okay, kids play outside. That's normal. That's normal human behavior for kids to play outside. We're talking about a kid, like an infant or a toddler, literally cast out of his house and left to die or just get adopted by who knows. That's weird. It's so weird that the Romans did this to 20 to 30% of their offspring. 20 to 30%. About 1 in every 4 Roman births was cast out to die or be adopted, maybe, or eaten by wolves. Huh? Yeah, that's pretty weird, but it was pretty normal for them. And it was commonly done as a form of, the Romans, like in China today, they preferred men over women. So a family might have 4 sons and 1 or 2 daughters. And they accomplished that not by ultrasounds, but by leaving the daughters out to be eaten by wolves or, giving them to poor farmers to be adopted. If a child was born with birth defects or looked weak or sickly or jaundiced, the Romans and the Greeks also did this to some extent, and other cultures in ancient times, they would literally leave the thing outside to die. Like literally, 20 to 30% of the time, they were leaving kids out to die. If there was a case of violation or incest or adultery, that baby goes outside to die. This was a very common thing that the Romans and the Greeks and other pagans, and these guys, the Romans and the Greeks, they beautiful architecture and art and whatever it is, their plays and their philosophy. Meanwhile, they're leaving 25% of their babies out to die. Yeah, okay, so Baruch Hashem for the Jews. So the Jews are picking up these babies off the street. So what do you do with them, Lamaisa? So Im Rov Ovdei Kochavim, if they're living in Rome or they're living in a pagan city, you consider him an Oved Kochavim. You consider him not a Jew. Im Rov Yisrael, but if it's a Jewish city, you consider him a Jew. It's a bit of a chiddush because Jews were not known to leave their babies outside to die. I'm sure Nebuch, in some situations, what's that? So if you find a boy with a bris, that would be very different. That would be a very different situation, because if he has a bris already, that's a pretty good hecker. He's a Jew, but the Gemara doesn't mention that possibility. So you'd imagine, in general, Jews wouldn't be doing this. But we say, even so, if it's a majority Jewish city, they might be in a situation where they're very poor, they're trying to get the baby adopted, something like this. You know, if you find the baby in a nice basket with a note that says, "Please save my baby," and it's all wrapped up nicely with a bow in the hair, you know they don't want the kid to die. They want it to be adopted. And that's not, the Romans would sometimes send the kids out, you know, totally naked with nothing, you know, just for the wolves. And Nebuch. You know, it reminds us of Hagar and Yishmael. Yishmael was sick and he was going to die, and Hagar's like, "I don't want to see it. I'm out." You know, and she left. Didn't want to see him die. Whereas the countless Jewish women in very difficult situations with children dying in terrible illnesses, lo aleinu, we should never know from this, they were with their children to the end. So it's like we said yesterday, Jews are rachmanim. Jews are merciful. Gomlei chasadim. Jews give chesed. You know, Jews are not like the other. Baruch Hashem. We're not domain to the Romans. Thank God. But anyway, the halacha considers it, if it's a Jewish city, we assume the kid is Jewish. Mechetzio. What if it's literally half and half? There's 50 non-Jews and 50 Jews there. Yisrael, we consider him a Jew. HaRav lo shanu elech. That's only to keep him alive, to give him chiyus. Rashi says to give him parnasa. It says chayach, he might be Jewish, so we keep him alive. Now you should know, it's not just Jews that we keep alive. And I don't want you to get the wrong impression from the Rashi. There's a famous Gemara, and if it's not famous, it's going to be famous when we learn up Gittin Samech Aleph. And Gittin Samech Aleph says, Tana Rabbanan Mefarnesim, we provide sustenance to Aniyei Nochrim, to the poor non-Jews. Im Ani Israel, just the same as we provide to Jews. Tzedakahs for everybody. Not only that, Mevakrin Chole Nochrim, we visit the sick, we care for the sick. Im Chole Yisrael, just like the Jews. This is why so many hospitals are called Sinai. Jews invented hospitals. Kovrein Mete Nochrim, we bury the dead of the non-Jews. Im Mete Yisrael. Rashi says, Lav Dafka, not in the same cemetery, but you understand, if it's a Meis Mitzvah, no one's there to bury him. So we mentioned in Moed Katan Daf Hey, burying the dead respectfully is a Jewish invention. Jews invented that. It used to be only the paro and the king and the rich people got a good burial. Jews invented respectful burials. Why? Mipnei Darkei Shalom. Because of matters of peace. Darkei Shalom here is used kind of like Tikkun Olam. It's sort of like, you know, it's sort of a quid pro quo. It's like, if we show proper behavior, we give out tzedakah, we bury the dead, we heal the sick of everybody, then the entire world is elevated, because they're going to say, wow, well, the Jews are taking care of our sick, so if we find a sick Jew, let's take care of him too. The Jews are burying our dead, so if we find a Jew, you know, all alone, no one to bury him, let's bury him too. And the entire world gets elevated. This is the true Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is not about just giving money to a cause. It's about changing your own behavior to set an example for the entire world so that everybody behaves in a better way. So the Gemara here, you might have gotten the impression that, oh, laha chayosa, we only give parnasa to a Jew or a Suffolk Jew or a place where it's rov or it's mechetza. No. The Gemara in Gittin says we give parnasa to everybody equally. We give tzedakah to the Aniyei Nochrim just like Ani Yisrael. It's a very important concept to know that we are equal opportunity. Mipnei Darkei Shalom, mipnei Tikkun Olam. Good, so we provide for him. Avala Yuchsin, but could he marry a Kohen? No. So we treat him as a Jew, even though he's a Suffolk, we found him on the street, you know. For Yuchsin, no. Shmuel Amar Lepikeach Alav Etagal. We treat him as a Jew to remove stones from him on Shabbos. We'll break Shabbos if his roof collapsed and we need to dig him out. We're going to break Shabbos and dig him out and do everything we can to save his life. You know, we're going to get Hatzalah in the ambulance to help him even on Shabbos. It's interesting. You should know Hatzalah has hired non-Jewish nurses to give non-Jews infusions on Shabbos to protect them from COVID. You should know, that's Hatzalah is Makayim. It's a beautiful thing. They've Makayim this halacha to a T. The halacha in Gittin about, you know, healing non-Jews. Hatzalah is doing it. Lamaisa. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Beautiful thing. So we save his life. Ishtamite, Hadam Rabbi Yehuda. So they'd forgotten. They're comparing it to this case where you go after one rov. Ishtamite, Hadam Rabbi Yehuda, Amarav, Bekronish Tzipori, Hava Maisa. So what Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, like we saw on the top of Amud Aleph, this was when there's wagons. So this case of the girl going down to the well, there was not just one rove of tzipori, but there's a second rove of the guys on the wagons, and that's why they were matir her to kahuna. It wasn't necessarily haras shah. It might have been when there were two roves, so she's good to go for yuchsin, even for the miuchas kohanim. Rav Chanan bar Ravad Amar haras shah haita. He says it was a haras shah. It was a one-time thing. It was only one rove. It wasn't market day. Kasha, it's a kasha to him. So okay, if you taught it this way, it was haras shah, then you didn't teach that there were two roves of the wagons. But if you teach that it was a normal psak halacha, that would allow this girl to get married to a Kohen, that's because there were two roves, the rove of tzipori, which is kosher l'kahuna, and the rove of the guys coming in for market day, kosher l'kahuna, and we need that as a gezerah, so we don't have a mechetze al mechetze kavua issue. Gufa, matzah batinich mushlach, getting back to the kid you find on the street. And again, it could be very different if you find him in a basket with a bris milah, then maybe you know he's a Jewish kid who's trying to get adopted. But if you just find stam, a kid on the street, you don't leave him there for the wolves like the Romans. We try to take care of him. We're chachayoso, we're fanasa, even though he's probably not a Jew in a non-Jewish city, we take care of the guy. Im rov of the kachavim over the kachavim, im rov Yisrael mechetzi Yisrael. So even in half and half, we'll treat him misafek as a Jew. Amarav lo shana l'chayosa. Rav says that's to give him parnasa, again, to feed him, to take care of him, to get him a job and education so he can live a life. Aval yuchsin lo, but not to marry a Kohen. Shmuel amar lepakeach alav et hagal. Shmuel says this is now pikeach, we use this pikuach nefesh, is saving a life. Pikeach here is also in the sense of pichin, to be smart, to like carefully, and you understand with some, you can't, if someone's roof collapses, you don't just go in there with a shovel. You try to find out where the guy is, you try to find an air pocket, you don't want to crush him. So to be smart about it when you're trying to save a life, you have to be aware of what you're doing. Me Mar Shmuel Hachi, did Shmuel say this? HaRav Yosef, HaRav Yehuda, Mar Shmuel, Ein holchin bikuach nefesh achar harov. We don't go with bikuach nefesh achar harov. So even in a city that's mostly not Jewish, even if Hatzolah gets a call, and maybe the guy's not Jewish, even probably not Jewish, even if you're on a team and you're sent somewhere to try to help people or buried under rubble, and maybe they're probably not Jewish, you do it, you go. And to their credit, Eretz Yisrael, frequently when there's an earthquake or a problem, they'll send out teams of experts to help clear out the rubble and find people and rescue them and save them. And this is a kiyum of this Gemara. It's a beautiful thing that even though it's rove not Jewish, and the chances this guy under the rubble is Jewish is very slim, but we will break Shabbos. We will be digging and hauling and getting out the excavator and digging up the rubble on Shabbos. A Jew on Shabbos is digging up the rubble to save a life. And we don't care if that life might be Jewish or not Jewish. We are getting the excavator and we are clearing out that rubble carefully, so don't crush anybody, to save a life, even on Shabbat. That's what we do. That's the Jewish way. That's what we do. That's this halacha. Elaki itmar Shmuel. So what is Shmuel saying? Areisha itmar. He says, I'm robe of the kochavim. He says, if most of the city is not Jewish and you find a kid lost on the street, we'll assume he's not Jewish. Why? Even so, we will dig him up. If the roof collapses on his head, we got to save his life. We're going to go ahead and dig him up and save him. It's not, so we don't go after the rove for pikech at the gal, for saving him from the collapsed building, the collapsed roof. We go ahead and save his life anyway, no matter what the rove is. Rove not Jewish, rove Jewish, we save his life anyway. If most of them are idolaters, so why do you have to know this? You're taking care of him anyway, you're giving him parnasa anyway. So you could feed him the not kosher meat, because it's probably not kosher. But l'maisa, we do feed him. We do take care of him. We don't let him starve. But you could feed him nevelas even. Imrov Yisrael ma'hilkasa, amrav papa aveda, to return his lost object. Now the Torah, it's a good idea to return anyone's lost object. If anybody, Jewish or non-Jewish, drops their wallet, you obviously return it. But when we learn about the halacha, the sugya of chashavas aveda, to stop your work and to interrupt what you're doing to return aveda, that's by achicha, that's by your brother, that's dafka by Jews. Rav Papa says we treat him as a Jew for that halacha. So we need to know if it's half and half, we treat him as Jewish. Why? For nezik, for damages. Now this is a bava kama issue we're going to just touch on here briefly. Hey chidami, what kind of nezik are we talking about? If a ox that's owned by a definite Jew attacks the ox owned by this kid we found on the street, we don't know if he's Jewish, it's half 50-50 chances, IT Ra'id Yisrael, so he should bring a proof that he's Jewish, v'shakol, and then he could take the damage from the other guy's ox, the definite Jew's ox. Lo tzricha denachei Torah didei l'Torah didon. So it's only when this suffix, we don't say 50-50 chance. His ox gores an ox that we know for sure belongs to a Jew. Polga Mishalom, he pays half damages, Chatzi Nezek. We're going to talk about this in the first chapter of Bava Kama, coming up in a couple of years. Not even. Ve'idach Polga, and the second half, Amar Lahu, Aidi Raya, Dlav Yisrael, Ana Ve'ten Lachon. He says, bring a proof that I'm not Jewish, and I'll give you the second half. So Rashi speaks out what's going on. In Bava Kama Lamed Zayin, we have a very strange halacha, that if the ox of a Jew attacks the ox of a non-Jew, he doesn't pay for it. But vice versa, the ox of a pagan attacks the ox of a Jew, he pays for it. Now that sounds very strange, and you're right, it does sound strange. It sounds so strange that there's a Gemara on Bava Kama Lamed Ches. Rabosai, if you need more coffee, drink it now. This is amazing. This is life-changing. This is a life-changing sugya. I guarantee it. This is all about whose ox gored anyway. Kvar shalcha malchus Romi shnei sardiotis. The Roman government sent two investigators, etzel chochmei Yisrael, to the sages of the Jews. And what were they doing is these investigators were like religious inquisitors, and they were trying to make sure the Jewish religion was in alignment with the laws of Rome. And if not, the Jews are going to be in trouble. Because the Romans, the Romans tolerated various pagan faiths, but you had to abide by Roman law. The Romans were the law of the land. So they sent their inquisitors to see if the Jews were playing along with official Roman ideologies. Limada Toratchem. And they said, you have to teach us your Torah or you're in trouble. Now, normally we don't go and teach Torah, especially Torah Shebal Peh, but this was, under threat of government punishment and decree. So, Karu Vishanu Vishilshu. So the Romans learned, and they reviewed a third time. Besides, the Romans reviewed 3 times. The Romans, who hate the Torah, who hated the Jews, who murdered countless Jews, they could review the sugya 3 times. What can we do? We could at least do 3 times. We could at least be as good as the Roman inquisitors. At least we should do this. We should, God willing, Hashem should give us the koach that we should be able to learn the daf, either hear the daf inside, we should look at the daf, look at the art scroll, look at the targum, look at something you understand, and then review it one more time, 3 times, third time's a charm. Do at least as good as the Romans. The Roman inquisitors who hated the Jews reviewed the sugya 3 times. This is such a musar for all of us. 3 times for both sides. Just learn the daf 3 times. It will change your life. It will change my life if I could do that every day. I don't get every day, but on days you do the daf 3 times, you know about it. You feel it. You feel different. You've accomplished. You're at least as good as the Roman inquisitors. Anyway, so what did they say after they learned the Torah 3 times? Bishop Tiratan, when they learned the entire Torah and they were going back to Rome, Amr Lahem, they said, Didaknu b'kol Toratchem. We have been medaktek. We've looked into every aspect of your Torah. Ve'emesu. You should know the Torah is emes. The Roman religious inquisitors who had examined every religion in the world said, yeah, your Torah is true. Your Torah is emes. It's definitely emes. Chutz medavar zeh, except this one thing we don't agree with. She'atem omer, that you say, shor shel Yisrael shanaga shor shel Kanani pater. A Jewish ox that gores an non-Jewish ox is pater. Shel Kanani shanaga shor shel Yisrael ben tam ben muad mishalom nezek sholem. Whether it's tam or muad, we know a tam based chatzi nezek. They're like, what's going on here? Chatzi nezek. What are you guys doing? It sounds a little racist even. It's like the Romans have a good point here, right? And the Romans say mimanaf shach. You can tell the Romans were learning Gemara. The Romans were definitely learning Gemara because the Romans say mimanaf shach. They say, yeah, okay, beautiful. These guys were Talmudic sages already. I re'ehu davka. If we mean re'ehu in the pasuk, it brings re'ehu. Shor shel re'ehu. Your friend, your fellow Jew. If that's davka, filo de kanani. It should even be a Kanani, Kanani Israel pater. Even a Kanani that gores should be pater, because it's only the ox of your fellow who pays chatzi nezek or full nezek. If it's lavdavka, filo de Israel Kanani Kanani l'chayev. Then even a Jew goring a non-Jew's ox should be chayev. Davarzei enonu modim oso lemachos. They say, listen, we don't agree with it. Mimanav shach, we don't think it's right, but we're not going to inform on the Roman government on you because we've learned your whole Torah and we think it's all emes, except that one thing, so we're not going to inform on you and snitch to the Roman government that's going to come persecute you. The Yerushalmi brings that on the way home, they forgot all the Torah because they stopped reviewing. So, okay, Lamaisa, we should keep reviewing. guys, the Romans could review it 3 times. We could at least be as good as the Romans. So the Maisa, Bava Kama here, Bava Kama Lameches doesn't bring an answer. So why did the Jews have this discriminatory halacha? Rambam has an answer. Rabbi say this is a take-home Rambam. This is amazing. This is truly, I can't believe we're doing a Rambam in Nizaki in Kesuvos. We're learning about marriage contracts, and here we are in the Rambam in Nizkei Mammon in the 8th Perek, 5th Halakha. Shor shel Yisrael shnaga shor shel akum bein tam bein mud pater. Why? Rambam explains. Lefi she'ena akum mechayvim es adam al behemta. Because in non-Jewish law and non-Jewish courts, it was not an actionable offense. It wasn't a cause for action if their animal did damage. That's a Jewish law. That wasn't a non-Jewish law. So we give them the same din that they use on themselves. Under their own laws, they're not chayav on their animals. So if our animal hits their animal, we say, listen, under your law, we don't pay, you wouldn't pay anything. So under our law, you don't pay anything. But a non-Jewish animal that attacks a Jewish animal does have to pay. Why? This is amazing, Rabbosai. Knas. It's a penalty. Knas hu le'akum, to the pagans. Levisha einan zahirin b'mitzvahs. They're not careful in mitzvahs. Here, Rambam means the 7 mitzvahs, which include not damaging other people. Einan misolki nanezek. They don't protect us from damages. They don't lock up their dangerous animals. Im lo techayivasan, if you don't make them chayiv for the damage your animals do, al nizke behemtan, on their animals, ein mishamrin asam mafsidim amon habrius. If you don't make them liable in court for letting their animals out to cause damage, they're going to let their animals out and cause damage because under their laws, they're not liable for that. So we instead make a knas, we make them strictly liable for damages that their animals do, so they'll be careful and not cause damages. This Rambam is the basis for product liability. When a company releases a faulty or dangerous product to the public, whatever it is, a medication that causes side effects, and then they have to retract it and all of these things, this Rambam says it's a knas. We want people to be very careful releasing their animals or their dangerous products to the public, so we'll make them liable to pay full damages so they will be careful and not cause damage to the world. That's the Rambam explaining the Bava Kama, what that the Romans had a problem with after they did Chazara 3 times. And that explains the sugya here that it's product liability, it's animal liability is the reason why we treat the shore of an akum a little differently from the shore of a Yisrael. Hadran alach besula nisei, Mazel tov, we finished the first parak. We have 3 minutes left, so we're going to start the next parak. Baruch Hashem. Aisha shenis armala, a woman who was widowed, onit garsha, or divorced. Who omeres? He omeres. She's saying, now she's in Bezdin claiming her ksuva money. Besula nisatani. She says, you married me as a besula. For who omer, and the husband says, obviously, this Rashi says this is a case of divorce, not a case of death, because he's not talking after she's dead. Loi, he says, no, ella ki ella omana saticha. I married you, omana. You were already a widow. So he's saying she's entitled to 100. She's saying she's entitled to 200. Im yesh edim, if there are witnesses, sheyatzos behinuma, that she went out with a hinuma. This is some sort of head covering that the Gemara is going to explain later. That was the custom for only betulot, only first marriages to use it. Rosha perua, or her hair was uncovered. Again, if she was already married previously and widowed, her hair would have been covered already. That was the minhag. That was how they did it. So if she's going with her hair uncovered, we know she was a betula at the time of the marriage. Kesuvota matayim, she gets $200, 200 zuz in the kesuva. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baruch omer af chila klayas raya. Even the distribution of kilayot, which is like popcorn, parched grain, candies, like throwing rice. It's the same thing. Throwing rice or throwing grains at a wedding, that's chiluk kilayos. That was a minhag that they did only by the betulot. So he says that's also a proof, also at least evidence supporting her claim that she gets a kesuva of 200. Modi Rabbi Yeshua ba'omer lechavero. Rabbi Yeshua agrees in another case when someone says to his fellow, Sadezo shel avicha haita. This field used to belong to your father. I purchased it from him. Now, obviously, if he has a deed of sale, if he has a shtar of the deed, then he's okay. So here there's no shtar, but he's saying, listen, this was your father's. I bought it from you. We didn't know otherwise. Shu neman, why? Top of Taz, shepei she'asur, upei she'hitir. So this is tomorrow's daf is going to be about this concept.
Hapesha asar, the mouth that makes forbidden, hu hapesha hitter, is the same mouth that makes permitted. So we would not have known that this field belonged to Reuven's father until Shimon shows up and says, hey, Reuven, this was your father's field, but I bought it from him. Since we never would have known otherwise without Shimon telling us, Reuven has no claim to the field. Im yesh eidim shehi shel aviv, but if there were eidim that the field first belonged to Reuven's father, hu omer lekachti amenu eino neman. But in the absence of a purchase document or a deed, he's not believed just to say, yeah, I bought it from your father. We're going to see a similar case by the woman. A woman shows up to town and she says, I was married, but I'm divorced. I'm single again. I'm on the market for shidduchim. We believe her. But if she just, she could have just said that she's the Pesha Asar, says she was once married. She's also the Pei the Hitter, says I'm now available. So that's going to be the topic of tomorrow's daf. Mazel tov Rabbosai, please today be at least as good as the Romans. 1, 2, 3 times, that's all it takes to be as good as the Roman inquisitors. Shkoyach, have a great day.